Have you ever wondered how savvy investors profit big in Florida real estate? Join us as we journey through the Florida tax auctions, uncovering the path to profitable real estate investments. Stay tuned, and you'll find out.
Hey, welcome everybody. This is Ted Thomas, the Tax Lien Certificate and Tax Deed Authority. Today, Ted's going to break down how to make big profits in Florida. Now, Ted, just to be clear to start off, does Florida sell tax lien certificates, or do they sell tax defaulted property?
Well, just to make sure you're confused, they sell both. But let me start out and explain both of those for you. Okay, so the answer is both. Florida is a very benevolent state when it comes to tax lien certificates, and I'll explain that. The local county, the treasurer, tax collector, they don't evict the property owner. They leave the property owner on the property when they have a tax default, when they sell a tax lien certificate. That means the county makes a claim. That's what a tax certificate is. All right. Now, the full answer really is going to take me a second here. They're not going to confiscate their property. They're going to leave the property owner on the property, and that property owner can stay there for 2 years. Now, that 2 years is called a right of redemption period. They can stay there for the full 2 years. And we'll talk about that as we go along.
So how do tax lien auctions work in Florida, Ted?
Well, tax lien auction works like this. All 67 counties can have the auction, okay? Now, the rate in Florida can be all the way up to 18%. However, keep in mind when Florida auctions tax lien certificates, it's a reverse auction. That means that's a down bid process. 18% will be 17.5, 17 continues down. All 67 counties have basically the same rules, and in the month of May and June, when they auction these certificates, they will auction up to 1 million certificates in the state of Florida in May and June. All right, so the auctions are held by the county treasurer. Treasurer enforces the auction, and they get all their direction from the legislature and the county board of commissioners, tell them exactly what to do. All right, so tax lien certificates are considered a passive investment. So people raise their hand, they get a certificate. They only get a piece of paper. They can't go on the property. All right, so they can't do anything. They just hold the certificate until they're ultimately going to get paid. When will they get paid? Anytime during that 2 years of right of redemption, they can be paid. If they don't get paid during the 2 years, well, then there's going to be consequence. The consequence is going to be that the property owner is going to lose the property after 2 years, and the person that owns, or the group that owned the tax lien certificate, they are going to end up with the property. Keep in mind, if you buy a tax lien certificate in Florida, you have to wait 2 years before you can do anything with it.
Well, how often does Florida host these tax lien certificate auctions?
They do the auctions pretty much in the month of May and June, and the counties decide when they're going to do it, but they're pretty standard. In other words, if Orlando decides that they're going to do it in June, they'll probably do it every June. The 67 counties, there's plenty of them to go to, and 1 million certificates available. So you're kind of getting the idea. It's important that the investor that's going to this auction read the rules of the auction, because the counties are really separate taxing districts, and that means they can change the rules a little bit. So the governing process there all comes from the state, but it's really enforced by the local treasurer. Now, I want to explain the treasurer. Treasurer has power. It's the most powerful person in the government. They have the power to actually change the price at the auction. They have the power to stop and start the auction. So you need to understand the rule, and the treasurer controls that particular county.
So you said that Florida does sell tax deeds. How does that process work?
Well, as I mentioned, it sells both tax liens and tax deeds. So tax lien is a simple investment. It's a little more complex with a tax deed. All right, now tax deed means that the person didn't pay the tax. The 2 year period has now gone by. Now they're going to have a tax deed auction. That means the property is going to change hands from the state. It's now going to go to that owner. All right, now, when you go to a tax deed auction, you are going to receive the property, okay? All right, so it's a little bit different than a tax lien auction. All right, so I'm not an attorney, and I'm not a broker, and I'm not an investment advisor. I'm really a guide and a teacher for this. So people should, if they don't understand what we say here, they should have a skilled attorney explain the whole thing to them. But research and due diligence is required before you buy at a tax defaulted auction. Now, I'm telling you, you've got to research these properties and you've got to walk on that property and make sure that you've done your due diligence. What's due diligence? That means you inspected the property. What's the condition? What's the condition of the deed? What's the condition of the title? You need to know all that. If you don't know that, you would find out that the treasurer is going to take the mortgage off the property. They're also going to take off the deed or trust. However, municipal liens and federal liens will stay on the property.
Well, regarding to these tax deeds, then, how often does Florida have tax deed auctions?
Tax deed auctions can happen every single week if the treasurer wants to do it. Now, I mentioned earlier that the treasurer has power. They're actually selling a property. They need to sell this property because they don't want to use property on their hands. They don't want it because it's not generating revenue. A treasurer needs revenue to pay the police department, the fire department, the schools, pay the county employees. All right, that's where the money comes from. So the treasurer can auction every single week if they want to. Generally, treasurers in a small population county will do it a few times a year, but you get places like Miami or Broward County, which is Fort Lauderdale, or even West Palm Beach. They have large populations and they have a large amount of tax to fall to property. So the treasurer could have an auction every single week if they want to do that. It's all up to the treasurer. Treasurer has power to do what they want, but you understand they have a lot of responsibility and they got a lot of people to pay. So they're going to have tax defaulted auctions on a pretty regular basis.
Hey, listen, if you're watching this and you have a question for Ted, you can get an answer to that question. Just leave in the comment section below. His team is keeping an eye on this and you will get your answer. And while you're down there, please like the video and maybe even subscribe to Ted's channel. Hey, Ted, one last thing. You talked a little bit about, how often these auctions happen, but how can folks find out exactly when and where they're happening?
Well, they could go right below me and they would find out about something you can do with your computer. You can just sit there and move your cursor and it'll tell you exactly how many auctions are going to take place in that particular state, when they're going to take place, and you could do real in-depth research. So that's right below me. Now, before we go, I want each of you to ask yourself this question regularly. How much do you want what you want? Are you willing to give up your old ideas? Right now, while you're watching me, you have a lot of things that are traditional viewpoints in your head. So your head is full of traditional viewpoints. Are you ready to acquire new ideas and new viewpoints? That's what we cover on these videos.
Thanks for watching, everybody.